and welcome to the Influence Global podcast. Now today I've got a really special guest with me, and we're going to be talking all about digital PR and SEO from Honcho. Really lovely to have James with us today. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So just before we get into the whole world of digital PR and how it's changing and developing, perhaps just give a little bit of context into your own personal background.
Yeah, so I used to sort of work in a totally different industry. So if you were to ask me sort of 12 or so years ago whether I even knew what SEO was, I had no clue about SEO at all. So previous to working in the SEO industries, I worked at ITV for around nearly 8 years, sort of running votes and competitions and stuff like that. So, you know, like some of the biggest shows on TV like X Factor and all that kind of thing.
How exciting.
Yeah, it was quite fun, but it was very niche, as you could imagine, right? So I kind of got to a point when I was working there of thinking, I need to break out of this bubble that I'm in and move into something. So I've always felt like I was quite a creative person. I was looking for something more creative. I've done music and stuff like that in the past, so that used to sort of feed my creativity. But I wanted a job that was more creative. So started looking around, found an agency called Distilled at the time, who have been acquired by Brain Labs since, actually, so they're not around anymore. But they were based in London Bridge. And they had a role going for like a project manager in their creative team. So I kind of used my transferable skills as a project manager and moved over into this agency world, not really knowing what was going to happen or really what they did. So I kind of landed on my first day. They told me what they did. Their creative team was basically the digital PR team, which created sort of digital PR campaigns for various different brands, small, large, UK, US, that were all sort of with the purpose of getting press attention for brands. So yeah, I had no idea about how to do it or how the sort of creative process worked, because it's very different to sort of coming up with an idea for a typical sort of advert or a marketing campaign for a brand. There's nuances to it in terms of the ideas and the things that you talk about. So you come at digital PR from a very different angle from a creative perspective. So there was a steep learning curve there, but what I found was something that really fueled my creativity, that side of things that I was looking for. And then, 11 years and various different agencies, a stint as a freelancer in between. Later, I'm kind of still here leading digital PR teams and doing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, PR, of course, is evolving and changing, because, you know, some would have said, the critics in the industry, isn't PR now dead? Because of, you know, a lot of copyright can be AI driven. Obviously, you would say otherwise, but it's evolved and changed, hasn't it? And I'm guessing it's also allowed people that are experts in the field to be focusing on what really matters for clients in terms of strategy and personal branding and development.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if anything, I think we're one of the channels of SEO and marketing that is actually benefited from AI in two ways. Obviously, there's, from an operational standpoint, there are some efficiencies that come with using AI. But the fact that the way AI works, sort of LLMs and AI overviews and things like that, there is a real need for brands to be cited from other publications on the web in order to be visible in LLMs or in AI overviews as well. So very similar to how traditional SEO works in that sense. So what we found is
high-ranking sites and getting that positive attribution.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's now important for traditional SEO, you know, ranking high in Google, which is what people used to come to us for, to get those links so that you could be featured as high up as possible. But now, like I said, LLMs and AI overviews are really looking at those same trust signals as well. So it's working on sort of, you can think more 3 different platforms rather than just the one of Google in that sense. So yeah, we're sort of, it's far from dead. It's, if anything, it's having a moment right now in 2026. Like, people are really clamoring for digital PR again, because it's like, okay, we need this.
Well, also, it's very difficult for businesses to get cut through, where attention is the new oil in a way, isn't it? Because, you know, constantly outreaching on LinkedIn or cold calling, some of these things are very, very challenging for sales teams. You know, never has there been a time when thought leadership and personal branding has been more important.
Yeah, definitely. And so, like, obviously thought leadership and personal branding play a part in digital PR. So a lot of the things that we do in digital PR, for example, we will look at utilising experts at a particular brand or a founder or someone like that.
Yeah.
And we utilise them in some of the campaigns that we run or reactive PR that we do. I can explain a bit more about what each of those are later if you want, but we can really help amplify a particular founder or anyone's sort of personal brand in that way as well. And it all feeds into itself. If you've got a good presence online as a personal brand, and we use your voice as an authority in a reactive piece or an expert quote for a publication, it all helps each other, doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean, I'm also a freelance journalist, so I pitched all the time for guests on my show, but also I've written for places like the London Evening Standard, things like that. And you realise now that a really good PR agency understands their journalists. They craft the content knowing what the angle is.
Exactly.
And so the days of an automated press release it's almost like just spray and pray. Whereas if you've got these very personal relationships, particularly with the journalists, because some of them are lazy actually, if I'm honest, and if you're making it very easy for them to write about a piece, but I guess also bring to the attention causes and issues.
Yeah, definitely. So exactly that. Like everything we do is from a story first angle, right? So it's about making sure the journalists or the select journalists you're going out to are going to look at that and go, I need to run that now, basically.
Yeah.
But obviously the skill, and this is something that AI can't replace, is in the ideation phase, really, and having those ideas and concepts and data and everything else that you can craft to make a story which is both relevant to the brand that you're working with, but relevant to the journalists and publications you want to get into as well.
Of course. So give me an example, perhaps.
Example. I'll give you sort of like maybe not an example, I'll try and think of one, but what I could say is, like I said earlier, around that sort of steep learning curve that I had when I started in this industry, was because when we used to have ideation sessions at our agency, I would sort of very much go into these sessions with an idea of, like, okay, the brand sells pencils, we need to do an idea about pencils, right? Which is just totally way off of what you need to do. With digital PR, you need to basically sort of look outside the box, you go one step removed, really. So understanding what your audience resonates with, and then coming up with topics and ideas that fit in that sphere, but don't talk about your product really that much at all.
No. So you're positioning them as an expert on the wider subject.
Exactly.
It's almost the subtlety is the skill.
Yeah. And exactly in that. And it's in the hope that obviously your correct audience will kind of see this article and see what you're written about, see it as informative, see you as a thought leader in that space, and consider you at another point in time for a potential purchase around a product, right?
Yeah.
But obviously intertwined with all of that is obviously we're doing this for the algorithm as well, right? So linked with everything we do is sort of keywords that we want to be ranking for. So if we create a bit of content which lives on a brand site, it'll be it'll be heavily optimized for certain keywords and key phrases that we want to see an uplift for. And by getting those features in different publications, it feeds that. So I think there's this kind of misconception sometimes that doing a digital PR campaign or running a digital PR campaign to get coverage is linked directly to a purchase. It's not necessarily that someone's going to read an article that you had a feature in and then purchase from you immediately. It's about the other effect that you're going to get as a result.
You're seeding influence, aren't you, in a way? Yeah. So what do you think some agencies and brands need to be doing more of to find that they're going to be, I mean, you've sort of alluded to it a little bit by getting onto these mainstream journals and things, but not everybody's got their own but what are the sorts of things that you're thinking that they should be, like their top immediate 5 things that they should be thinking about?
If they want to do it sort of in-house, do you mean? Or
yeah,
sort
well,
of,
either in-house or externally, but it's the tactics I'm thinking about. What are the... Because, I mean, web traffic for a lot of brands is falling through the floor. And that's obviously has profound impacts on bottom line.
Yeah, it does. I think... So there are a few sort of tactics and levers that we put on as an agency for brands, depending on, ultimately, a lot of the time, budget, really.
Quite.
Time and budget, right?
Yeah.
If you're a multi-million-dollar corporation who's got money that you can spend, then the world is open to you. You've got everything from sort of doing outlandish stunt activities, throwing someone out of a plane, that kind of stuff, which gets coverage and all those kind of things, down to sort of a lot of the stuff that we do for most of our clients would be sort of fitting in what we call like trend campaigns or data-led campaigns, where we're kind of pulling, if we can, first-party data from a client, which is always the best thing to have.
Cool. Their own original
their own data, whether that be around sales figures for certain things that they might be selling, all that kind of stuff, and we could make a comment on, example of that could be like a fashion brand who is selling, what kind of pattern clothing is in fashion at the time or around the country, and you can glean that from looking at purchase data and looking at postcodes that have bought the most leopard skin, for example, that kind of stuff. You can start to make cool things like that.
So you could do some social listening, to find out what people are talking about, and then use that to facilitate some stories.
So there's anything, like I say, you've got stunt campaigns, which is like, could be all kinds of things. You've got the data-led campaigns, which what we kind of typically tend to sit within. And then you've got what I call reactive as well. So reactive PR is probably the easiest thing to get into, because it doesn't require you to create anything as such. What you would create really is kind of get a quote from someone internally, like an expert or founder, whatever it may be. And it's just really about listening to the news cycle, use tools such as response source and things like that, where journalists are looking for experts to comment on something, for example, and it's about reaching out to them and trying to get your expert, your brand placed in those conversations with, a comment which makes sense.
And you mentioned something quite interesting, because sometimes people aren't always aware that there is a news cycle, which is often a very limited time window. Now, some would say that we're all journalists with Twitter and everything else. So the immediacy of response is very important. Just because, I was out at a conference today, might mean that you've missed it. It's also good to mention that a lot of this is about having a very personal relationship with journalists, isn't it? It's not just their name on a list. They get bombarded with things. So how do you do that?
So it's an interesting one. It's a question that we get asked quite a lot, which is like, what are your relationships like with certain publications or journalists and things like that? So obviously, as an agency, we're constantly reaching out to different people and sending stories and things like that. And obviously, we'll have stuff featured by certain people, and we tend to get a rapport with them off the back of having things featured, to the point where they actually reach out to you at times and actually ask, have you got anything around this or that, for example, which is, that's the best thing really, when people are actually coming to you and asking for things. And you generally build that up just through experience and reaching out to people and just being on their radar and giving them good quality stuff. We keep in line like that. And then what I would say though to that is that, like I say, it is a question that gets asked a lot, and I like to caveat that by saying, just because you have a relationship with a journalist or a publication doesn't mean they're going to run everything that you do as well.
No.
Because it's all about quality first. If the story's not there, it's still not going to land. It's not going to run. But yes, it's great to have those relationships.
Because and how much of that is mainstream versus very trade-specific publications?
It depends, because
depends on the client, of course.
Yeah, it depends on the client, exactly. So we work with clients in the automotive industry, travel industry, floristry industry. So it's up to us to kind of build those rapports in those relevant sort of trade publications at the time when we need to. So, and then you can imagine, after being in industry for so many years and having worked across loads of different industries, you start to build that bank up of different people and publications that you can go, right, I know, speaking to a finance client today, like we spoke to a bank earlier this week and did a pitch. The first few slides that we had was just like a whole page of all the banks and places we've worked with previously. So as a result of that, there's loads of places we know we can go to, publications, journalists who've featured our work before, and we can go back to them again and stuff.
Yeah. And I think also in terms of justifying spend, things like using clipping services and being able to showcase exactly where those have been published and their impact and obviously we in the influencer world always talk about impressions, but of course it's the same in PR, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So it's with like clippings and stuff like that. So we really don't deal too much in clippings. We might find that if we get a bit of print coverage, sometimes we do, we'll do that.
A lot of it's digital, of course. Of course, yeah.
With it being digital, obviously our sort of metrics and KPIs that we kind of report on are things like, obviously first and foremost, where you got featured. So the publication, the domain rating of that publication. So domain rating is a score from 0 to 100. A very sort of popular tool that's used in the SEO world called Ahrefs uses to define how authoritative your site is. The closer you are to 100, the better, basically.
So like ITV, BBC News would be very, very high, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they're like in the 90s, something like that, So if you get a link or a placement in a publication like that to your website through the campaigns that we're doing, that's seen as a very sort of...
But do they do that? Do sometimes they publish the story but don't send the link?
Sometimes, yeah. Unfortunately, they do that. Yes, and we don't always have control over that. And some publications have sort of like a no linking policy as well. But what we do find is that it varies from journalist to journalist. Even you might go to a publication that's got that kind of policy in place, but you go to a certain journalist there and they do put a link in versus someone who doesn't. So it's not always,
Do you worry, James, about sort of AI slop? In other words, we're now in this sort of, we're overwhelmed with AI content. How do we sort of help brands cut through as being the legitimate source and the trusted source? I mean, one of the things I have loved about the BBC, I'm not always their greatest fan, but I do like the fact that they created this BBC Verify, which was a symbol of them. Not all news is correct and right. And what we have is an entire team that checks all the sources. Do you see that evolving, or a concept of that, which is effectively a truth checker?
Yes. So a few things on that I can talk about, really. So for a lot of the work that we do, we'll have an expert sort of lend their voice to something we've come up with. So if we've got some data in there or a comment around the industry, we'll attribute that to an expert at said brand. And there's been a lot of talk recently in industry because some places were basically making up these people using AI. So they were kind of making fake images of people and saying such and such is an expert, such and such a brand, and they didn't actually exist.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so they were going out to publications like, the Daily Mirror and all these different places that should be running stuff that is, correct and verified, and attributing certain comments and quotes to people that just didn't exist. So that's one way that it's, kind of infiltrated our industry a little bit.
And that could be very damaging, not only for the brand, but for the publisher as well. And have all sorts of ramifications, couldn't it, really? Do you have ever instances where you are defending a negative story, but where the brand that you've been working with for a number of years has come under the spotlight for any particular reason, and therefore you are in a slightly defensive mode of putting maybe another side to the story? I'm thinking of the Petrol Retailers Association in particular recently, who actually do a really good job, but some of the other media have put out all sorts of stories, and I thought what they did and how they presented themselves was very good, because they came at this from a hard facts. This is how much of the margin goes towards petrol, and this is how much our retailers get, something like a wafer thin margin. And a lot of it's about lack of education. So I just wondered what you thought about that.
So most of the time we don't have to deal with stuff like that, which is good, because I prefer, and we do prefer as an agency, to kind of deal with more of the let's say, light-hearted, sort of fun, creative side of things.
As opposed to crisis management.
Yeah, as opposed to crisis management. But we have got one client on the books at the moment where that could be something that we do help them with, and it's more around, I won't go into details, obviously, because of the brand, but they were involved in sort of like a governing body for their industry. Mm-hmm. And they came out of that governing body because they didn't fully sort of align with how they regulated the industry and what they did. And they have separate findings of their own to combat sort of like, the regulations that they imposed on companies within that industry. Mm. And they've come to us and they've asked us if we can help in that way. And we've kind of got together a plan as to how we can help them, which involves basically, as similar to what you said, which is, bringing that their own data to the fore. Mm. This is why we've come out of this, because we have done our own studies and scientific evidence to prove this, this and this, which is at odds with what was being said before. So, we are sort of looking into things like that. But on the main, we don't deal a lot of the time with too much of that kind of crisis comms, fortunately.
You work with founders, did you say? With some founders?
Some founders, yeah. So what we might do is we'll typically work with medium to large companies, but we need an expert commentary. If we can, get a comment from the founder or someone in between or an expert, then we typically work in that way, yeah. Mm.
And what type of content do you think, presumably they'll come to you with a problem, we need to get our brand out there. What would typically you would do with them? So you'd sit down, have a meeting, and you start to carve out a strategy. Yeah. What might that look like? And I know it can be different for different people, but what are the sort of common elements into that process?
Yeah. So you're right. It starts with an immersion session, first and foremost. So this can be sort of anything from half a day to a day of just really sitting with the brand and understanding the ins and outs of everything. How they operate, how they work, who their target audience is, how they find you, what's your USP, that kind of thing. As well as finding out what kind of publications and where would you like to be featured, and really a really sort of integral thing to that is what kind of topics are you happy to be talking about as well. Because like I said, a lot of stuff we do for this kind of work is to go one step removed from you as a brand and think about the wider audience and what they like, but is also related to you. So just understanding where you're comfortable going, because we can go crazy, or we can keep it kind of close to home.
So social listening, of course, would play a big part in what you do, I'm guessing. So you are looking for trends and things that people are talking about. And do you tend to work within the UK only, or are there opportunities globally?
So mostly UK, US, and then recently, like I said earlier, the florist brand we've been working with, we helped them out in Poland, Sweden, Netherlands, and Germany as well. Mm. So we can kind of do it all. Yeah.
Amazing, great. Well, look, thanks so much for giving that little spotlight on digital PR and SEO. It's really, really great to see how it's evolving and how well you're doing. So how can people find out more about you, James?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. I can't keep up with any other socials, so that's where you can find me. James Roach. I work for Honcho search agency, so either one of those you can find me through LinkedIn by looking me up on there.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So thanks again for joining us on the Influence Global podcast, and I'd like to say a big thank you as always to my partners and sponsors, the Branded Content Marketing Association and the Marketing Podcast Network.